You got the power. Stream it online. What? That's crazy. We're back again. It's live and local. It's the name of the program. Steve West here. 254-5286 if you want to call into the program and talk with my next couple of guests. Let's start with the guy I've been pals with a long time and has been at BCTV a long time, Mr. Frederick Noisy, Access Coordinator at Brattleboro Community Television. Hi.
How are you?
Thanks for being on my show. You've done my show a couple times.
I have.
Yeah, so thanks for being here. And to your immediate right, Mr. Andy Reichsman. Hi, Andy.
Hey, Steve.
What should we say about Andy Reichsman?
Oh. The list is...
I could take an hour right there.
Well, to be clear, for those who don't know, Andy will be the keynote speaker at the annual meeting tomorrow night, Thursday, and looking forward to hearing what you have to say about that. And the perspective is that you were co-executive director in 91, 92, and then stayed out there on the board through the 90s?
Most of the 90s.
Most of the 90s. But let me, before we get into BCTV, man, did I love your Lilac Ridge film that you and Kate made.
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
At the Latches, and what a crowd, and people loved it. I mean, not just because I love Lilac Ridge Farm, but the film nailed it. I mean, just nailed the spirit of what was going on, and I commend you highly for it, and I encourage people to check it out if you haven't seen it before.
Thank you. We were thrilled at the turnout. That was a heck of a busy night there. You know, it was a Stroll Friday, gallery walk, million things happening, and we filled the Latches, and it was just, I mean, most of it's a testament to the Thurbers, not to us, but it was great and beautiful. You know, everybody loved it, so we were really happy.
Well, it's certainly a hard subject to do poorly, but you guys really hit it out of the park. I thought the film really nailed everything about it. So listen, we're talking about and encouraging everybody, members, to be at the annual meeting tomorrow. I totally thought it was Latches 4. It's at the museum.
It's at the museum.
I don't know what I was thinking. I guess it's from last year, but
yes,
at the Brattleboro Museum and Arts Center, the annual meeting, and we invite people to be, certainly members. You're hopefully expected to be there. But Freddie, why don't you talk about a little bit about what it is all about and who should be there?
Sure. Well, you know, our annual meetings have sort of gotten ramped up in recent years, so that it's more of a party and a celebration to sort of look back over the previous year and to look forward to what's coming next. So, you know, there's some business that needs to be done that, you know, is maybe mildly tedious, but I think we try and make it as fun as possible, and that includes board elections and maybe some bylaws things and whatnot. But we also have food, we have awards for producers, we do a couple of video montages, so we're really sort of trying to highlight some of the best, the cream of the crop of what's occurred over the previous year, and help to kind of clue people in. Because even our producers, some of them, you know, live in places where they're not able to see the channel, so they know their own productions. They may see who's working in the edit bay next to them or whatever, but they're not familiar with it either. And so it's a great sort of way just to sort of build that community and community television, to get together and kind of reflect on that, and to really see some great sort of techniques and what people are doing with their programs. There's really a lot of sort of creative stuff. I know people kind of think of us as the channel with the, you know, gavel-to-gavel coverage of select board meetings and planning commissions and stuff. Important stuff, no doubt about it, but we also like to highlight the creative stuff where people are going out and filming segments and spending a considerable amount of time putting those together and really making those look great.
And thusly encouraging others to do the same. You know, the more local content, the better, for sure.
Yes.
So I guess I sort of want to get into what Andy's going to talk about tomorrow as well, and just frame a larger discussion about, you know, last year was talking about a more ancient version of BCTV, with all due respect to those who are, but you know, going back to the 70s and up. But Andy, your time was in the 90s, not that far away, but far enough away that we've seen dramatic changes in how BCTV operates and what it delivers to the crowd. Give us a gist of what it is you want to address tomorrow night.
Well, basically, I started thinking about what BCTV was like when we started, and I should say it's an important thing to know. There was a period of time where BCTV was essentially shut down. It had a really great life, and there was all kinds of great programming, like the Brattleboro Tonight, which was a fantastically funny show, and he was the guest speaker last year.
Yeah, he was great.
And 30 Minutes from Marlboro was a really good, serious, interesting, provocative program. But at some point, the cable franchisee for Brattleboro decided that, I mean, you would almost have to think they decided to see how little they could get away with, how little of providing public access. So they sort of eviscerated the whole public access concept. They picked a very nice person to be the face of their public access and then gave her nothing to work with. So the
Awesome.
equipment was completely junk and nothing worked, and it was very, very minimal. And this infuriated a lot of people, and actually a lawsuit ensued.
I
And
didn't know anything about this.
yes, this is
Wow.
the fabulous
It's a
history.
long, colorful history.
Yes,
There has
and
been some color.
the franchisee was sued. And a lot of people followed this case because it really was a question of what is the responsibility of a cable franchisee to the public access idea. Well, for once, the good guys won. And BCTV was awarded a lump sum of money for all the, I don't know how many, it was a couple of years at least, where they had not been given their legitimate financing. So they got this lump sum, and all of a sudden, they had money to buy a whole new line of equipment and set up a studio and all the equipment for that. And they needed a whole new group of employees. So it turned out that my wife and I applied for the job and were hired as the first new executive directors after the break.
Wow.
And so, and part of the
High
challenge,
drama.
part of the reason we took the job was we thought it would be really, really cool to start up a television station, you know, and so that's why we took it on. But so in that context, that's how we came to BCTV.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, when you think about it, we had this, they had this money, and they bought a pile of brand spanking new equipment, And when I look back on what that equipment was, the quality and the capabilities of that equipment, it was really challenging to anybody, whether you were a trained veteran of film and video for years and years, and more so for somebody who was coming in and saying, gee, I'd like to make a program, and had never done anything. It was all very challenging and very difficult.
We're talking probably 3/4-inch U-matic tapes?
No. Actually, we were SVHS.
You were SVHS? Even there? Okay.
SVHS,
All
which
right.
is basically VHS. It's super VHS. The super part I don't quite, I
Right.
can't quite speak to that. But
still
and the thing that was most frustrating and most difficult was the editing. There's now something called non-linear editing, which is basically computer editing, and it's basically like Microsoft Word except with pictures.
Right.
In those days, the way you edited was you took the tape that you had shot and you recorded some onto a new tape.
Yep.
And then you took another shot and recorded it next to the shot that you had just recorded. And anytime you wanted to make a change or decided, gee, I don't like that beginning part, you basically had to start all over. And the other problem was that VHS was particularly prone to degradation from generation to generation. So the second generation of VHS looks muddy, and the third generation, is just frightening.
Barely watchable, yeah.
So simply put, the leap from analog to digital is not just a small next grade up. It's a total sea change in terms of how anything operationally happens at
It's
BCTV.
really astounding when you think about what's available now. If you were to think about sort of in Andy's era, you'd be talking about, hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to acquire the equipment necessary to
Right,
do
right.
what we can do now for a few thousand.
I mean, I can tell you very simply, in those days, when you wanted to do basically non-linear editing, you went to New York or Boston into a studio that cost $550 an hour
Yep.
to rent, and the equipment probably costs $1 million or more, and that's why you had to pay $550 an hour.
Yeah.
And today, that level of production value is available when you buy a computer
For a free
for
download.
free. I mean, it's just
Well, I
just
started
incredible.
I started recording music in the middle '80s, complete with 2-inch tape, 1/4-inch tape, and razor blades.
Sure,
And
yeah,
that's how it all went down. And at the time, there were Fairlight computers, so the new introduction of computer in recording at all. But we giggle at it now, which was a pretty big advancement back then. That technology was pretty amazing for then. But now, we're many
Oh, yeah.
leaps beyond that
Oh,
in
yeah.
terms of how we record material, auditory or visual, and what have you. I got to take a break. Frederick Noyes is here, Andy Reichsman here. We're talking about the annual meeting tomorrow at BCTV, or not at BCTV, the BCTV annual meeting at the Brattleboro Museum and Arts Center. We'll come back in a little bit and chat some more with these here fellows. If you have questions, you can certainly phone them in. 254-5286 is the number. This seems a fitting song to go out with at this current juncture.
I heard you were wireless back in 52.
I still like this song. You know this song? Oh yeah. We'll play Stump the Frederick. Back again, it's live and local. Steve West here, Frederick Noyes, the Access Coordinator from BCTV, and our keynote speaker for the annual meeting tomorrow, Andy Reichsman from Ames Hill Productions. Listen, and we're talking, you know, sort of, I mean, going back to the 90s when Andy was on the board and running the joint with Kate. Again, the differences are, it's not that long ago, but still, in terms of how the technology has advanced, it's that long ago. I mean, it's a whole different animal, one would argue. So I want to get back into some of that, but more importantly, not necessarily stay stuck in the historical perspective, but just talk about the mission of community television, talk about the mission and execution that BCTV is so, I think, so wantonly competent at doing. But I also want to make sure that people know about the party, which is the meeting, but party, you know. Regani Pizza, yay. It's my new favorite addiction. We'll be serving food. That's Tristan Tolino and Corinne and Dan making pizzas to order.
Yes, indeed. And that starts at 6 o'clock. Just want to mention
Brattleboro
that.
Museum and Arts Center.
Yes.
6 o'clock pizza and cake.
Yes.
Turns out there's cake.
There will be cake.
Yay. Who's making the cake?
I don't know the
see?
answer to that.
Core will call.
I'm sure it's a gourmet cake, though.
Yeah.
We don't do
Fine
any
cake.
half measures at
Fine
BCTV.
cake.
Only the best, yes. But it is, you know, certainly a celebration. But you know, I will say, in inviting the general public. Certainly, members are there. General public can't vote. Obviously, if you're a member, you can vote because there will be some actual formal voting taking place.
Yes.
But we just want people to come down and enjoy and celebrate what BCTV does and is. Let's talk about that. And I wouldn't mind getting your sense now, Andy, about what you appreciate about BCTV. But also, let's talk about the longitudinal sense of mission. Do you see or do you sense a change in mission, or do you feel like it's still ostensibly the same animal, just updated with better technology?
I think the public access mission has remained pretty constant over the years. I mean, I do have one story. It's in my speech, but I'm gonna give it away anyway.
Awesome.
But one of my favorite stories, when we first started at the station, we decided in order to get some programming on the air right away, we thought, well, what could we do a little documentary about or something? So it turned out Circus Smirkus was coming to town, and it was a fairly young organization at that point. So we said, okay, let's just do a little thing about what they do. So I went down to the Big Top when they were going to perform in Putney, and it happened that year that Circus Smirkus had brought some mentors from Russia.
Oh, cool.
Because there's some great circus performers in Russia. So these were very experienced, trained people, and they came over and they spent the summer with the kids. So I was filming, and this Russian guy comes up to me, and he said, "Well, what are you doing? What are you filming for?" In the course of explaining, I had to tell him about public access and what it was. And this guy, I mean, it's 1991, so
Yes,
Russia, Soviet Union was just, I think it was breaking up within a year, but it was still a pretty, tight-fisted place. And this guy was flabbergasted. He was just amazed. He couldn't imagine. It was outside of the possibility of what could be in the world.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at the public access mission, without taking it for granted, and there's a huge range of public access stations in the United States, and some of them are extremely active and political and activist and
Sure.
and community, and some of them there are many other things that public access serves, but basically it's up to every station to proceed with putting the average person's voice on the air.
Right.
And and then you think about these times, the times of the Supreme Court ruling that any amount of money can be poured into a political campaign, so that the rich and the corporate voices get louder and louder and louder. We're in a time where, getting the average person's voice across is a really huge deal.
Yeah.
And that is what public access is for, is to let, you know, anybody in the community have access to the most prevalent form of communication in our
Right.
in our society.
Freddie, I want to get your thoughts on that from an insider's perspective as a staff member, and you've been there long enough to see. I guess I'm curious. It's my sense as a member of the board that we are grateful for all the local content and grateful for people accessing the cameras and putting together stuff, but also saying, like, I can't believe more people aren't doing this.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, considering what we have available, and this happens when, you know, folks from other access stations come in and visit from around the state, and as Andy was saying, you know, just within Vermont, you basically can go from you know, sort of multi-million-dollar facilities up in Burlington where they've got 3 stations, one's public, one's educational, one's government, so they're split that way. We've got 2 channels here. And then others are basically a broom closet with a couple of VCRs in it. So, I mean, you've got that whole sort of range. But people come here and are amazed at the size of our studio, for example. We definitely have one of the largest studios in the state available.
To come.
Yes, indeed. Available to the public free of charge. You know, that's one of the things that you can't overemphasize, is that everything is essentially free. You know, there's a small fee for the trainings, and those will even be waived for people who need that. But basically, you pay for your tapes if you need those, your blank media, everything else. You know, use of the cameras, use of the studio, everything else is totally free of charge.
And what's not permissible? Very little.
Very little, yeah. I mean, you know, I often call it First Amendment television. You know, basically, let's see, games of chance, copywritten music can't be used. You know, we don't really like corporate logos. I mean, you know, if there's sort of happenstance things that, you know, somebody's got a logo on their shirt or something, we don't blur it out. But, you know, you know, calls to action, which are, you know, buy my book or go to Joe's hardware store, it's the best hardware store in town, that sort of stuff. So we're observing a similar kind of line that, like, you know, public radio would, in terms of, we don't say these are our advertisers, these are organizations that support us, and we are lucky to have several great organizations in town that, you know, do financially support our efforts.
And the other thing that is not allowed, and I think this is true pretty much across the nation, is nothing obscene and nothing considered libelous. And of course, you know, define obscenity.
Yeah.
You know, that's something that the board would probably make. You know, the board would look at something if there was a question in the staff's mind and determine whether it would be considered.
And rarely, if ever, does that line get pushed, right?
I would say that's true. I would say there are ideas that are put forward. I certainly haven't seen anything obscene, overtly obscene, in my tenure here. But there are certainly ideas that people find distasteful, and we've certainly gotten phone calls about certain programs of a certain bent, I guess you could say, where people are very unhappy about it, and our response is, a local person sponsored this program and/or made this program, and you are certainly welcome to come in and do a half-hour or hour-long response to that, and disassemble those ideas and you know, create your own response.
I remember there was you know, in the distant past when I was there, occasionally there would be something along the lines of, I believe a Ku Klux Klan tape was submitted to the station, and initially it caused some concern about, well, what are we going to do? But, you know, it's free speech, and our response was, just as Frederick said, great, let's get some response to this. And in fact, you know, the amount of programming that ended up on the channel that was, you know, responding to the original tape was probably 5 times as much as the original tape.
Fantastic.
And it led to a lot of really good discussion about the subject. So that's the best way to deal with anything. I mean, you know, unless it's truly obscene or something like that.
Yeah. I think people don't often recognize, and Freddie, we've talked about this, that, you know, BCTV is really a portal, a tool available to the community, rather than, hey, you guys ought to send somebody down, there's a thing going on. Yeah. It's not like you have, like, hey guys, let's get in the van, get down. You know, it's like, that's not the function of it. That's a television station, a commercial television station will do that. But BCTV is available, like, here you go, want this? You know, very little investment financially, you know, and very, you know, honestly, just to learn how to edit tape, you know, in 2 meetings I think we had, I kind of grokked the idea,
Yeah.
and certainly guidance along the way as you go. And there are people who can edit film and so forth who are genius. Joe Bushy, is great at what he does, and a lot of notables. But anybody who's anybody, a Luddite of any kind, can just get in there and learn the ropes, and before you know it, you're off and running.
Well, when I teach these days, which I do occasionally, so I'm in a room full of college kids, and I say to them, "You guys were so smart to be born when you were, because what is available to you compared to what was available to someone. I had an interest in film when I was a teenager. You had to. It was Herculean what you would have to do to make a little film, and most people didn't. And now, almost everybody, even if you only have a cell phone, you probably have a video camera in your possession 24/7, and software programs for editing all over the place that are really easy to use, and it's so much easier than it used to be if people understood how easy it is to. I'm not saying it doesn't take work to make a program. It definitely takes time, and the more effort you put into it, the better it turns out. But it's not that hard to make a program, and people should, if you've got something that's happening in your life or something that you're interested in or want to say to the public, you should come down and
Or a
sign
talk
up.
show, a variety show.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Gotta take a break, but last thought on this?
I was just going to say, I think in some ways that's the new frontier, is the fact that, 75% of people are walking around with a video camera in their pocket at all times now. And, news happens, news unfolds. We certainly saw this with the floods. People went out and were just documenting the Whetstone and the West River and everything else that was sort of going on. You didn't need credentials, you didn't need, and pretty soon some of those YouTubes are showing up on national network news because it took them a day or two to get here to realize, Irene actually wasn't completely overblown. There was a story
This
here,
is a big
and all of a
story.
sudden, and then we're getting phone calls from CBS and the BBC and
And some of the BCTV footage from Roland's 545 Live winds up on national
MSNBC.
media.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes.
Go figure.
Absolutely.
Let's take a break here and come back and talk more. And I wouldn't mind talking about the advent of the internet and streaming and things of that nature. So stick around. We're going to be talking more. Frederick Noyes is here. Andy Reichsman is here. It's all about the annual meeting tomorrow at the Brattleboro Museum and Arts Center. We're down around Malfunction Junction. You know where the museum is. Come on. 6 o'clock, things commence with the pizza.
Yep.
And after that, we'll be talking about stuff. Andy and Roland's putting together his montage.
Oh, you won't believe it.
I can imagine.
And cake.
And cake. Did we mention there's cake? I'll play some cake when we get back. Stick around. Give a call if you'd like. 254-5286. Awesome. Freddie, let's spend some time talking about the event itself. What have we not shared with folks about the annual meeting?
Well, let's see. I just wanted to acknowledge we always do producer awards, and this year we're focusing more on the producers themselves rather than specific shows they did. Last year it was a little bit more about the programs, specific programs, and we just felt there are certainly several people, such as the aforementioned Joe Bushy, who's sort of a one-man video army, and has his fingers in so many different video pies, so to speak, that it seems silly to sort of focus on just one of those sorts of things. So there's just one example. Teresa Maggio, who we've talked about many times, Tigo, who used to work for the Reformer, and is really a consummate storyteller.
That's a good way of putting it, yeah.
And has taken her writing skills to another level by making videos that tell stories about interesting things happening around our community.
In a very personal and humane way. I think she has a tone and a voice that really brings out the humanity in whoever it is she's focusing on.
Definitely. In fact, most recently she drove all around Windham County and videotaped the aftermath of Irene and what was going on. We'd all sort of seen what was going on in Brattleboro and kind of nearby, but she went out much further and kind of looked at other areas. And we serve multiple towns. We're basically from Vernon to Jamaica now, so between the two cable systems, it's a significant portion of the county. So we wanted to, we want to make sure that we're including all of the towns that we serve and acknowledging where they're at and what's happening there. So
Certainly.
That was really an eye-opener, I think, for a lot of us who don't travel to some of these places on a regular basis to find out what was going on there,
Right.
and using her sort of trademark touch of finding people on the side of the road and people having to cross logs to get over streams and finding out what was it like for them.
And she captured some real sadness and
Yeah,
in that
definitely.
little vignette.
Definitely, and we will, and we do this montage every year, and we're looking back at the year in video, as seen on BCTV's 2 channels, and obviously this has been a year of a lot of ups and downs, and that will be reflected to some extent, in the montage. Not to belabor it, but that obviously the Brooks House fire, an unfortunate event, but we had no less than 4 or 5 of our producers out there with cameras videotaping from various perspectives. So, that's the kind of stuff that has an immediacy, and some of that was showing the next day on Channel 8.
And I have to say, we'd be remiss to not mention that the advent of 545 Live has been a really pretty bright thing, and I commend Roland and all of BCTV for putting it together. And for those who don't know, at 5:45 every single night live, Roland does a quick synopsis of the day's news, and does it cleverly and well with video, and in 15 minutes time. And let me also add that when the flooding happened, that people were going to that to get the latest.
Yes, they were, and he was standing knee deep in the water
Yes,
on
he
Flat
was.
Street,
And actually,
on the scene.
I'm glad to have an opportunity to comment on that as well. I was in Marlboro. We were actually stranded for a day or so, and then we were able to get out. But we didn't lose power, so we actually were watching a coverage of the storm on a local Connecticut news. They had decided to go 24/7 on the news.
Yeah.
So we saw all these local reporters doing their thing, and wow, inarticulate, not able to put a sentence together, sort of, not that good. And then we chanced upon, we went online and we caught Ronnie's 545 on Flat Street. And it was like, oh my gosh, he's like 500 times better than the guy, the people who get paid professionally to do this. I mean, he's really terrific.
Yeah, and it's a great idea, and it also infuses a lot of now and immediacy to BCTV, because there is, and granted, both online and on the stations themselves, you can get stuff that's archived and that's been rolled a few times, but this is a live event that's talk about current, it's what's going on that given day, and I think that puts a little wind in the sails of BCTV as well, more than a little. So.
Yeah, definitely. And folks should know, all these local programs are archived, like you said, on the website, which is Brattleboro TV. BrattleboroTV.org. And you can see there's a flood channel, so you can basically just go and scroll through all of the flood info. There's a youth channel, there's all these sort of different things, so it's all divided up really easily so you can find what you're looking for pretty quickly.
Yeah, and for those who don't also know that every summer rolls by, there's a video camp for the kids that it's 2 weeks out of the summer, right? 2 separate weeks, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we did 2 different age groups.
Yep. And so that's another, and we're just kind of listing the advantages and the props of BCTV and what it offers to the community overall, and Chris Grotke helps out with that. You do that?
Yeah, and we had 2 great groups of kids, and again, these we'll see clips from both of the programs that we did incorporated into the montage. But it's an opportunity for youth to come in and develop a story together, and then and we basically sort of show them clips of what we've done in the past, so they have an idea of what sort of special effects we can do. But then we sort of say, now do something completely different. We've already done UFOs, we've already done flaming penguins. Now we want to see what you can do. And so this year we had a fairly straight film noir type thing. The gritty underbelly of Brattleboro with a hardened detective and with a surprise twist ending, and
Cool.
So that was fun. And then we had a sort of crazy cloning story. Was the second one in August. So Double Trouble and Dash, those are both called, and again both up on our
Let's take a break, and when we come back, and we get to wrap up, and I'll let people know what's going on with tomorrow's program, but I want to get more from Andy about his keynote speech tomorrow at the annual meeting, and also, your sense, and I'll put this in your brain as we go to the break, the give and take of information from the community. How do we reflect the community? We are the community when we are BCTV, but, the input from the crowd, and I'd like to know what it was like back then, what kind of feedback you were getting from people back in the 90s. We'll be back in a handful of moments, I promise you that. Back again, it's live and local. Steve West here. Andy Reichsman is here. He's going to be speaking at the annual meeting of the BCTV crowd. That means everybody's welcome, and certainly members are welcome to be there to vote on essential stuff, and new members of the board coming on board, one would hope. Frederick Noyes is here as well, BCTV Access Coordinator. As promised, we're just about out of time, but I do want to get from you, Andy. We on the board, try to stay open-eared to people, and God knows at an annual meeting we want to get input from people, anecdotally and otherwise, about what they want from their community television station. What was that event like for you all back in the 90s? How did you take the pulse of the town, other than the actual involvement of people in BCTV? What was your sense of the town?
Well, I always joke that we had a Nielsen rating, which was whenever the signal got lost or somehow totally screwed up, how many phone calls came into the station to say you're off the air, and you would multiply that by some factor.
Yes.
You could choose to 10 or 1,000, and that would tell you how many people were actually watching. But we had absolutely no way. And occasionally, you'd run into somebody in the street, and they'd say, "Oh, I saw that show, and it was great," and that would confirm that there actually people were watching. But
Always a good sign.
I mean, the thing that's wonderful. I mean, I think one of the big changes about BCTV today is the idea that on the streaming end of things, you can find out that there were 12,000 hits in a day, which for us in 1992, we would have thought that is not possible. You could never have it. I mean, that's all of Windham County is watching your channel. So that is great, and it just. That fact of 12,000 hits is just a testament to how the world has changed since the internet. And even when the internet came on, the idea that streaming video would be something that could be available to the average person. I mean, you're talking about a bandwidth and and all those kinds of issues that and also we were talking about cell phones being video cameras. If you had told me 20 years ago that a handheld object as thin as a credit card could incorporate video technology, I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
But anyway, we did have annual meetings in the good old days, and they were televised live on the channel. Is this televised this year?
It's not televised.
Okay.
But we are going to show one of your earlier meetings. As a clip. I've been doing the nonlinear editing on the original linear editing, and
beautiful.
taking a look at much younger versions of Tim Johnson and various other folks.
Nice.
There's always been, I don't know if this is true, Frederick, you can tell me, there has always been a cadre of people who were completely devoted to the public access ideal. And you would have those, it could be 5 or 12 or 20 people who just loved doing it, thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And for some people it turned their lives around. My favorite story, we had a volunteer at BCTV who I'm pretty sure when he came in the door the first day, he was homeless.
Oh my.
And he ended up winning a film festival with a public access show that he had produced, and he went on to do a lot of interesting things in film and video, and so there are a lot of stories like that. But I don't know. I mean, is that still true?
Oh, it's definitely true, and there's a very sort of slow cycling that sort of happens. So the 8 or 10 people that I was familiar with the first years I was there have largely moved on to different things.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another sort of 8 or 10 people that you see. Certainly someone like Maria Dominguez, who's been at virtually every select board meeting for the last 15 years or something like that. She's just a stalwart. And Teresa Maggio, there's Joe Bushy, there's a whole bunch of people that you kind of see on a regular basis. Greg McAllister is one of our newer producers, and again, doing really great storytelling with his sort of 8 and 13-minute videos, and we'll definitely be looking at some of his work.
Not to mention Daryl Pillsbury.
Daryl Pillsbury, yes.
Not on this show. We don't talk about that guy.
Oh, oops.
No. He's a favorite.
Yes.
I mean, certainly, obviously, in terms of the faces of BCTV, you see Daryl Pillsbury, Tim Johnson, and now Roland Boyden pretty regularly on the channels, between Open Studios and Daryl's hosting about a half a dozen shows at any given time. He's pretty much at every gallery walk. So.
And that's available to anybody. It doesn't have to be, Daryl Pillsbury or anyone listening, or anybody who wants to come to the meeting tomorrow. You can be a producer. You can produce local content, and it doesn't have to be fancy pants. It doesn't have to be. You just record it, edit it, and people will walk you all the way along.
Yeah, make your dream happen. Deshae Peacock, another example of someone who's gotten involved more recently. She actually attended the annual meeting last year as a very new person who is just sort of getting into the pipeline and has now been producing her own talk show, and she's she's had this dream and is making it a reality.
right.
She's very sweet. She was on the
Yeah,
program,
yeah,
and
yeah,
she
I read
loves
about
putting it
her
together.
in the
She's all about
program.
art, and she's just a very, very kind-hearted person, and I encourage people to check out the show. We got to stop. I don't want to get out of here without mentioning your film, Signs of Life. You're saying it's out and available.
Yes, it was made in the 80s, and it sort of went in limbo because the distributor went out of business, and so it didn't have a home, and finally it was put on DVD, and it's available on Netflix. It's called Signs of Life. It's
Or
about
Quickster.
one day, or Quickster, that's right. One day in the life of a boatyard in Maine,
Right
and
on.
it's a sweet little film.
Right on. Andy, thanks a lot. I look forward to hearing what
Hey.
you have to say tomorrow at the meeting. So thanks for being here. Thanks for being
I'll
on the
be
show,
there.
Karen. Yeah. Yes, you will.
6 p.m.
And pizza. 6 p.m. the pizza, and then we'll get to talking about
Cake.
things soon thereafter. And
Cake.
cake. Don't forget there's cake.
Yum.
Lots of cake. What kind of cake? You
Delicious.
Delicious
Good
cake.
cake.
That's
Good
my
cake.
favorite kind. Freddie, thanks for being here, man. A pleasure as
Thank
always.
you.
Thanks to everybody at BCTV. Tomorrow's program, by the way, I should let you know who's coming on tomorrow. Eugene Human will be here from the Jazz Center to talk about the upcoming event. Is it this? Yeah. Chuchito Valdez will be here this weekend. Then Nora Riley and Larry Haynes are here to talk about the Rescue Project. This is an interesting thing that was mentioned last night. Nora was at the Select Board meeting. And Dave Alstat will be here.
Oh.
Yes, from the Wyndham Workforce Investment Board. That's all about.